अस्सलाम वालेकुम। डॉक्टर तलत अफ़ज़ा माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स के 16th लेक्चर के साथ हाजिर हैं। इससे पहले कि हम आज का लेक्चर शुरू करें, जो कि हम एक नए टॉपिक पे शुरू करने वाले हैं, हम पिछले लेक्चर को थोड़ा सा रिव्यू करना चाहेंगे। आज तक जो हमने माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स के लेक्चर शुरू किए वो सारे फोकस कर रहे थे शुरू में कंज्यूमर बिहेवियर एंड कंज्यूमर थ्योरी पे, और उसके बाद हमने पिछले 3 लेक्चर्स में एक एलिमेंट ऑफ रिस्क एंड अनसर्टेनिटी को एनालाइज किया। हमने कहा इन तीनों लेक्चर से पहले जो प्रीवियस लेक्चर कंज्यूमर बिहेवियर के थे वो सारे के सारे एज्यूम कर रहे थे कि प्राइसेस एंड इनकम दे आर नोन, लेकिन जबकि प्रैक्टिकल रियल लाइफ में हम ये देखते हैं कि प्राइसेस एंड इनकम दे मे नॉट बी नोन इन एडवांस and they may not be known with certainty. Therefore, in the last 3 lectures, we covered the topic of risk and uncertainty so that we can highlight this aspect of the consumer behavior in the real life and the investor's behavior in the real life. So, the last lecture related to the risk and uncertainty was about how we can minimize or reduce the risk. And there we said, okay, we can use 3 different methods for the risk minimization or reducing the risk, starting with the diversification. Diversification was more applicable to the stock market, where we can select assets which are not related or which are least related. Therefore, our risks are minimized in the sense that our return variation in the return in the form of positive return and in the form of the negative return will be less. Then the second category was, or the second method used for the risk minimization normally is of the insurance. Insurance is basically used for individuals who reflect the risk averse behavior. आपको याद होगा कि इससे पीछे लेक्चर में हमने ये भी डिस्कस किया था कि इंडिविजुअल्स बिहेवियर को टुवर्ड्स रिस्क 3 डिफरेंट कैटेगरीज में डिफाइन किया जा सकता है या कैटेगराइज किया जा सकता है: रिस्क अवर्स इंडिविजुअल, रिस्क न्यूट्रल इंडिविजुअल एंड रिस्क लवर इंडिविजुअल. ऑन एवरेज इन जनरल इंडिविजुअल्स आर रिस्क अवर्स. देयरफॉर दिस insurance method of risk minimization is normally used by the risk averse individuals who would like to pay a certain amount in order to avoid the losses, and if the risk premium is equal to the cost of the loss, they will be willing to go and purchase the insurance. Then the third method normally used by the business executive is collecting more information, and they would like to pay for the collection of more information because the decision they will make after getting the full information most of the time will be a better decision as compared to another decision which is made with the incomplete information. And lastly, we also looked at the demand for the risky assets. There we just simply said we can define our assets, or we can categorize our assets into risky assets and the riskless assets. And then we also focused on the actual and the expected returns, and then finally we said, okay, how we can combine the risk return behavior of the investor with the help of indifference curve, and how we can make an optimum decision for the investor based on the budget line and these indifference curve. इसके साथ ही हमारा रिस्क और अनसर्टेनिटी का टॉपिक कवर हो गया. जैसे हमने पहले लेक्चर में कहा था कि माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स डील्स विद द इंडिविजुअल यूनिट्स, और इंडिविजुअल यूनिट्स नॉर्मली जो हम कंसिडर करते हैं दे आर कंज्यूमर्स एंड द प्रोड्यूसर्स. सो फार वी हैव कवर्ड द कंज्यूमर एस्पेक्ट, वी हैव डन द यूटिलिटी फंक्शंस, कंज्यूमर बिहेवियर, utility maximization, and when the consumers are equilibrium, consumer demand and the market demand, and then we have also covered up the element of risk and uncertainty. Today we are going to start with the second portion of these units, and that is the firm or the producer, which means that we have covered the demand side because the consumers, they reflect the demand side of the market. Now we are focusing on the supply side of the market, and that supply side of course comes from the producers. So आज के lecture में we will start with the topic of the production function, and then we'll cover up the isoquant, we'll explain that production function and the difference levels of the inputs to produce the same level of output with the help of the isoquant, and then we'll look at the production with one variable input, and then within that scenario we'll look at the law of diminishing marginal returns and finally the labor productivity. ये हैं हमारे आज के टॉपिक्स, लेकिन इन सारे टॉपिक्स में और अगले आने वाले टॉपिक्स में हमारा फोकस जो है वो अब सप्लाई साइड पे है। डे 1 से लेके लेक्चर 1 से लेके प्रीवियस लेक्चर्स तक हमारा फोकस था ऑन द डिमांड साइड, हमारा फोकस था ऑन द कंज्यूमर साइड. नाउ वी आर मूविंग towards the producer or the firm behavior, and then similar parallel to this is the idea that now we are moving towards the supply side. तो इस सप्लाई साइड में हम क्या कर रहे होंगे, वी आर गोइंग टू लुक एट द थ्योरी ऑफ द फर्म, और थ्योरी ऑफ द फर्म जो है उसमें हम एनालाइज करेंगे हाउ द फर्म्स मेक देयर ऑप्टिमम डिसीजंस, प्रोडक्शन डिसीजन वेयर दे कैन मिनिमाइज देयर कॉस्ट. क्योंकि कंज्यूमर बिहेवियर में हमने ये देखा था कि कंज्यूमर किस तरह डिसीजन बनाते हैं या मेक करते हैं सो दैट कि उनकी यूटिलिटी या सेटिस्फैक्शन मैक्सिमम हो. जबकि पैरेलल टू दैट प्रोड्यूसर बिहेवियर में वी आर ट्राइंग टू लुक एट द प्रोड्यूसर बिहेवियर और द फर्म बिहेवियर वेयर दे आर ट्राइंग टू मैक्सिमाइज द आउटपुट विद द मिनिमम पॉसिबल कॉस्ट. सो हियर द डिसीजन इज द प्रोडक्शन डिसीजन, जबकि हमारा कंज्यूमर थ्योरी में डिसीजन था कंजम्पशन डिसीजन. यहाँ पे हमारा प्रोडक्शन का डिसीजन है विद द ऑब्जेक्टिव ऑफ मिनिमाइजिंग द कॉस्ट. और उसके साथ साथ हम ये भी देखेंगे कि कॉस्ट जो है वो किस तरह चेंज होती है विद द लेवल ऑफ द आउटपुट. जब आउटपुट बढ़ जाती है तो कॉस्ट कैसे बढ़ती है या कम होती है, आउटपुट कम होती है तो आउटपुट पे क्या कॉस्ट पे क्या फर्क पड़ता है. और जब हम इंडिविजुअल सप्लाईज को, फर्म की सप्लाई को देख लेंगे तो उसके बाद जो है हम एनालाइज करेंगे कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स ऑफ द मार्केट सप्लाई. आपको याद होगा कि जब हम कंज्यूमर बिहेवियर को डिस्कस कर रहे थे तो वहाँ पे हमने ये सबसे पहले इंडिविजुअल डिमांड को देखा था, उसका एनालिसिस किया था और उसके बाद हम मार्केट डिमांड पे आए थे. इसी तरह सप्लाई साइड में भी जब हम जाएंगे तो पहले हम इंडिविजुअल फर्म के सप्लाई कर्व को देखेंगे या सप्लाई डिसीजंस को देखेंगे और फिर हम उसको कंबाइन करके मार्केट सप्लाई और उसकी कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स को देखेंगे. तो आज का लेक्चर हम शुरू करते हैं विद द आइडिया ऑफ द प्रोडक्शन प्रोसेस. कि बेसिकली व्हाट इज द आइडिया ऑफ प्रोडक्शन. Production basically starts with the input, that we take certain inputs and we produce certain output. We combine the input so that we can have certain output available for use. अब ये जो inputs हैं इनका एक दूसरा नाम जो है factors of production भी है. Inputs की फर्दर कैटेगराइजेशन भी हम देखेंगे कि आपकी इनपुट्स जो हैं वो फिक्स्ड भी होती हैं और वेरिएबल भी होती हैं, और इन्हीं इनपुट्स को हम फैक्टर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन के नाम से भी याद करते हैं. अब इन इनपुट्स की जो मेजर कैटेगरीज होती हैं वो क्या है. मेजर कैटेगरीज जो हैं वो हैं आपके पास लेबर, मटेरियल्स एंड कैपिटल. तो जब हम लेबर की बात करते हैं, लेबर इंक्लूड्स आर इंडिविजुअल हु आर इन्वॉल्व इन अ प्रोडक्शन प्रोसेस. यानी उसमें हमारे पास फ्लोर वर्कर से लेके मिडिल लेवल मैनेजमेंट एंड इवन टॉप लेवल मैनेजमेंट, उसमें प्रोडक्शन रिलेटेड एम्प्लॉय, मैनेजमेंट रिलेटेड एम्प्लॉय एंड एनी ऑक्सिलरी स्टाफ, एनीबडी who is participating in the production process directly or indirectly as part of that labor. यानी उसमें आपके पास white collar, blue collar, every kind of facilitator, whosoever that individual is part of that labor. So labor is an all-encompassing terminology. दूसरी तरफ जब मटेरियल की बात आती है, तो उसमें हमारे पास रॉ मटेरियल के अलावा और जो भी इनपुट इलेक्ट्रिसिटी और दूसरी यूज होती है फॉर द प्रोडक्शन प्रोसेस, दैट बिकम्स पार्ट ऑफ द मटेरियल. एंड देन फाइनली इज द कैपिटल. कैपिटल में आपके पास जो फिक्स्ड फिक्सचर्स है, कोई मशीनरी, प्लांट और एनीथिंग विच इज यूज्ड फॉर मोर देन वन प्रोडक्शन प्रोसेस, वो कैपिटल की कैटेगरी में आ जाता है. तो नॉर्मली हम कोई भी प्रोडक्शन प्रोसेस लें, हम जो कैटेगराइजेशन करते हैं फैक्टर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन की या इनपुट्स की, वो हमारी इन्हीं 3 ब्रॉड कैटेगरीज में फॉल करती है: लेबर, मटेरियल्स एंड कैपिटल. अब हम देखते हैं प्रोडक्शन फंक्शन के बाद. व्हाट बेसिकली इज अ प्रोडक्शन फंक्शन? प्रोडक्शन फंक्शन इंडिकेट्स द हाईएस्ट level of output that a firm can produce for every specified combination of inputs given the state of technology. ये तो है इसकी फॉर्मल डेफिनेशन. लेकिन हम इसमें कर क्या रहे हैं? वी आर सेइंग कि एक गिवन टेक्नोलॉजी को यूज करते हुए, यानी उसमें कोई चेंज नहीं आ रही, हम ये देख रहे हैं कि एक फर्म जो है मैक्सिमम आउटपुट कितनी प्रोड्यूस कर सकती है अगर वो इन फैक्टर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन या इनपुट्स को मुख्तलिफ कॉम्बिनेशन में यूज करते हुए. Another way to define the production process is that it shows what is technically feasible when the firm is operating efficiently. यानी इसका मतलब ये है कि हमारे पास जितने भी रिसोर्सेज अवेलेबल हैं, जब हम उनको फुली यूटिलाइज कर लेते हैं तो उसके साथ मैक्सिमम एफिशिएंसी लेवल के बाद जो आपकी आउटपुट आप ऑब्टेन करते हैं, दैट बेसिकली इज प्रोडक्शन प्रोसेस और दैट इज योर प्रोडक्शन फंक्शन विच इज टेक्निकली फिजिबल. अब हम प्रोडक्शन फंक्शन को मैथमेटिकली या एक्सप्रेशन वाइज किस तरह एक्सप्लेन कर सकते हैं, इसके लिए हम इस स्लाइड को देखेंगे. यहाँ पे हमारे पास Q रिप्रेजेंट्स आउटपुट, K कैपिटल एंड L लेबर. अब हमने पहले ये कहा कि हमारे पास जो है कॉमनली यूज्ड फैक्टर प्रोडक्शन या कैटेगराइजेशन ऑफ द फैक्टर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन इज लेबर, मटेरियल एंड कैपिटल. अब हम अपनी एक थोड़ी सी रिस्ट्रिक्टिव अजम्पशन लगाते हैं कि वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट अ प्रोडक्शन प्रोसेस जिसमें हम सिर्फ 2 इनपुट या factors of production use करते हैं, and that is labor and capital. So our production function with these 2 output will be written as per this slide here. Q is a function of K and L, where Q is the output, K is capital and L is labor. But here we are assuming for any given technology. We do not assume any technical improvement or change. अब इसको फर्दर इसी प्रोडक्शन फंक्शन को हम रिप्रेजेंट कैसे करते हैं? हम रिप्रेजेंट करते हैं विद द हेल्प ऑफ द आइसो क्वांट. जैसे आप रिकॉल करें कि जब हमने कंज्यूमर बिहेवियर की बात की थी तो हमने कहा था कि कंज्यूमर का बिहेवियर जो है वो इनडिफरेंस कर्व के साथ हम एक्सप्लेन कर सकते हैं. वी सेड ओके, गुड एक्स है, गुड वाई है, और उनके मुख्तलिफ कॉम्बिनेशंस जो हैं वो एक कर्व पे फॉल करते हुए जब सेम लेवल ऑफ यूटिलिटी देते हैं तो वो आपका एक इनडिफरेंस कर्व होता है. अब इसी के पैरेलल जब हम फर्म के बिहेवियर को एनालाइज करते हैं तो वी आर सेइंग के फॉर अ गिवन लेवल ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी जब 2 फैक्टर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन जो हमने अज्यूम किए हैं इस एग्जाम्पल में लेबर एंड कैपिटल मुख्तलिफ कॉम्बिनेशन में यूज किए जाएं एंड दे गिव यू द सेम लेवल ऑफ आउटपुट, सो दैट इज reflected on one isoquant. So isoquant basically gives you a certain level of output which is produced with different combinations of the given inputs, labor and capital for example. अब जब हम कह रहे हैं कि हमारे पास 2 फैक्टर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन है, एक कैपिटल है और एक लेबर है, अगर लेट्स अज्यूम कि हम जो है कैपिटल को फिक्स कर देते हैं, हम कहते हैं 10 यूनिट्स ऑफ मशीनरी, a plant size with 10 machines. For that given level of capital, if we increase the labor and that labor is working on that machine, so we may be able to get more output. Similarly, अगर हमारे पास labor which is working on those machines, suppose is fixed, we say 100 workers working on 10 machines, and now we increase the number of machines from 10 to say 12, 13, 14. So what we are saying here is that if we assume that the labor is fixed for a given level of labor, in other words, if we increase the number of machines, we may be able to get more output. So similarly, with various combination of capital and labor, we can get the same output, either by increasing the labor and reducing the machines, or increasing the machines and reducing the labor. So these curves which shows all combination of these different replacements, interchanges between capital and labor, they are reflected in the form of the isoquants. But all of these combinations, they are giving us the same level of output. अब एक example लेते हैं with the help of this slide here. Slide पे देखेंगे. Here we are taking a production function for food. अब assume कर रहे हैं कि इस food की production में we need two categories of inputs. One is labor and the other is capital. So the labor input is row wise and the capital input is in the first column. Now the first column, first entry, we have 1 unit of capital and then we have 1 labor. So we get 20 units of output. Now given the same capital input of 1, if we increase the labor from 1 to 2, what do we get here? 40 units of output. Further increase it to 3, it gives us 50 units of output. Now suppose we keep the labor constant, only 1 labor and 1 capital gives us 20, but when we increase the capital from 1 to 2, we get 40. So all of these entries on this table here, they are giving us various combinations of capital and labor, which are the only 2 factors of production by assumption in our example. So they are giving us different output levels. But if we look at this table more carefully, so the first combination where we are taking 1 unit of labor and 3 unit of capital gives us 55 units of output. Then we have another possible combination for the same 55 units of output, and that is 3 units of labor and 1 unit of capital again gives us 55. So there are 2 entries in this square here. One is 1 labor and 3 capital, 55 units, then 3 labors and 1 capital, again 55 units. So we have 2 combinations which are giving us the same level of output, which is 55 units. Then we go for another careful look, and that is if we take 2 units of labor and 3 units of capital, we get 75 units of output. So that value is given in the circle. Then another circle value, 75 units of output, where we are taking 1 units of labor and 5 units of capital gives us 75. Another third combination where we have 3 units of labor and 2 units of capital input gives us 75. Then one last combination gives us the same 75 units of output, and that is of 5 units of labor and 1 unit of capital input. So here for an output level of 55 we have 2 combinations. For an output level of 75 we have 4 different combinations. Now if we look at that triangles, here we have 2 units of labor, 5 units of capital gives us 90 units of output. Another triangle, the combination is different. We have 3 units of labor and 3 units of capital gives us the same 90 units of output, and last combination 5 units of labor, 2 units of capital input gives us 90. So what we have here is there are 3 combinations gives us 90 units of output, there are 4 combinations giving us 75 units of output, and 2 combinations giving us 55 units of output. We can have various more combinations. Let's look at the isoquants which are drawn with the help of this data set on this graph, and that graph is shown on this slide. इस ग्राफ के ऊपर x एक्सिस पे वी हैव लेबर पर ईयर and then we have the capital per year. We have assumed there are only two factors of production. So, we are saying, as the title says, production with two variable inputs L and K. Now, if you try to recall, when we were analyzing the consumer behavior, we said each higher indifference curve gives us higher level of satisfaction, and every point on one indifference curve gave us the same level of satisfaction. So, here we have the same scenario. If we start with the lowest indifference curve here, any point on this isoquant, for example point A and D, both are giving us the same level of output, that is of 55 units of output. If we have any point anywhere along this curve, we will have a different combination giving us the same output units, and they are 55. Then we go to the higher isoquant. Higher isoquant is giving us an output level of 75. Any combination of capital and labor will keep on giving us the same output on the second isoquant, and that is of 75. Then last curve here, the highest curve here is giving us 90 units of output with different combination, for example point C and E. So, all of these three combination, if we look at it in a row, they represents an isoquant map. In an isoquant map, we have each higher isoquant giving us higher level of output. It is exactly the same what we had for the consumer behavior, that each higher level of indifference curve gave us the higher level of satisfaction. Now, here each higher isoquant is giving us the higher level of output. Now, these isoquants here, they represent the input flexibility, which means here that if you want to get the same level of output, you can get it with different combinations of capital and labor. Now, what is the practical usefulness of these isoquant for the producer? The producer here can look at the factors of production market. What I want to say here is that the producer can make a better decision where he or she can minimize the cost. How is that possible? That by looking at one isoquant which is giving us the same level of output with different combination of labor and capital. Now, the producer can go to the labor market and the capital market, and if the capital is expensive, then the producer can replace capital with the labor and have the same level of output. Or if the labor is expensive, then the producer can exchange labor with the capital, replace labor with the capital, and have the same level of output. So, with the help of these isoquants, where we have various combinations of the two factors of production giving us the same level of output, the producer can make a better combination of capital and labor, so that he or she has the same level of output, but maybe with a different lower cost level, by analyzing the market for the labor and analyzing the market for capital and choosing the minimum cost combination. So, this is the practical usefulness of the isoquant, that if the producer wants to get the same level of output and various combinations of labor and capital can produce that level of output, can go to the marketplace and select a combination which can minimize the cost. Now, before we go any further here, we definitely would like to differentiate between the short run and the long run. अब इसकी ज़रूरत क्यों पेश आ रही है? इसकी ज़रूरत इसलिए पेश आ रही है कि कुछ फैक्टर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन ऐसे होते हैं कि जो कि आप शॉर्ट रन में ही बढ़ा या कम कर सकते हैं. कुछ फैक्टर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन ऐसे होते हैं जो कि आप शॉर्ट रन में बढ़ा या कम नहीं कर सकते. फॉर एग्जांपल, अगर आप प्लांट साइज जो है वो एक्सपेंड करना चाहें तो आप शॉर्ट रन में उसको एक्सपेंड नहीं कर सकते. इट नीड्स अ लॉट ऑफ टाइम. Whereas आपके कुछ फैक्टर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन होते हैं, फॉर एग्जांपल हमने कहा मटेरियल है या लेबर है, तो वो आप शॉर्ट रन में चेंज कर सकते हैं, बढ़ा भी सकते हैं, कम भी कर सकते हैं. इसलिए we need to differentiate between the short run and the long run, and we can say short run is a time period in which the quantities of one or more factors of production can be changed, whereas the long run is a time period in which the quantities of all the factors of production can be changed. For example, अगर हम AC फूड प्रोडक्शन की बात कर रहे हैं, हो सकता है कि शॉर्ट रन में हम कुछ हद तक तो कैपिटल को चेंज कर सकें, एक आध जो पार्ट मशीनरी एक्सपेंशन, लेकिन नॉट दिस एंटायर साइज ऑफ द प्लांट. लेकिन लेबर हम मोर और लेस जो है वो हायर कर सकते हैं, जबकि लॉन्ग रन में वी आर फ्री टू इवन चेंज द साइज ऑफ द प्लांट एज वेल. नाउ इन ऑर्डर टू एक्सप्लेन दिस आइडिया हियर, लेट्स टेक एन एग्जांपल, numerical example which is given on this particular slide. अब इस एग्जाम्पल में हमने एक फैक्टर ऑफ प्रोडक्शन को जो है वो वेरिएबल करना है और बाकियों को वी आर एज्यूमिंग दे आर हेल्ड कांस्टेंट. एंड नॉर्मली इन द शॉर्ट रन वी एज्यूम लेबर इज द most easy type of factor production which can be changed and can be made variable. So we are sticking to the same labor input or the factor production. The first column we are taking amount of labor L. We are starting with 0 and going up to 10. Then we are taking amount of capital and that is 10, which is fixed. So we are saying it is a short run phenomena where we are holding capital constant and we are changing the quantities of labor. And then we are looking at the total output in the third column, then the average product, and that of course is the average product of labor because we are varying or we are changing the labor, and then the marginal product. If we start with one worker and we have 10 units of capital, we have total output of 10 units. So average output of this first worker is the same as of the total, which is 10, because he is the only worker working in this particular production process. The marginal product, the change in the product is again 10, last column. Now when we add one more worker, we increase the quantity of labor from 1 to 2 and we keep the amount of capital fixed, our total output increases from 10 to 30. So the average is we take the total output 30 divided by 2 workers who are working, so the average becomes 15. What is the marginal? Marginal is the contribution of each additional unit, and now here we have each additional unit of workers. So here the second worker has added 20 units to the previous 10 units because our total output has increased from 10 units to 30 units. So our marginal output for the second worker here is 20. So as we move further and further, what do we observe here? Our third column, which is that of the total output, is continuously increasing till the 8th worker. We are starting from 0 output and we are going up to 112, which is at the 7th worker. And when we add the 8th worker, our total output remain constant. We add the 9th worker, total output start declining, and 10th worker it further declines. And we are going to explain these phenomena and we are going to discuss these phenomena in the later slide. But here what do we have is our total output is increasing, then constant, and then it start declining. What about the average output? If we look at the next column here, what do we have here? Our average output is increasing up to 4th worker, then it start declining. What about the marginal output? Our marginal output increases at an increasing rate. It starts from 10 to 20 and 30, and then afterward it starts declining. It becomes 0 at the 8th worker and it becomes negative. So overall, to summarize this topic here or this table here, what do we have here? With the addition of one more worker, and no change in the capital, our total output is increasing, and then it reaches the maximum and then it starts declining. Next is the behavior of the average output. The average output or the average product of labor here, which is known as AP, or output per worker, increases and then it starts declining. And how can we express and how can we calculate the average product of labor formally? Let us look at this slide here. We have the formula at the bottom of the slide. It states AP is equal to output divided by the labor input, which is also normally expressed as Q over L. Q is the total output and L is the number of laborers. And the third is that of the marginal product of labor. Now, the marginal product of labor or the additional output which we get by adding one more worker, it increases rapidly during the initial workers and then decreases, and finally it starts getting negative. It also becomes negative. And how can we calculate the marginal product? We can see that at the bottom of this slide here. Marginal product of L, which means marginal product of labor, is equal to change, delta represents the change in output divided by change in labor input, and it is also expressed as change in Q over change in L. Now, the same concept we can also express with the help of this graph. So, ग्राफ के लिए स्लाइड पे देखते हैं. Production with one variable input and that variable input is labor. We have taken the labor per month on the x-axis and we have taken the output per month on the y-axis. So, our total product curve, as we are adding more and more workers, our total product is increasing, reaches its maximum at point D, which is that of 112 units when we have 8 workers, and then it starts declining. Now, the slope of the line which is tangent at point A is the marginal product. Any point on your total product curve and the slope of that point is basically the slope of the total product curve on that line basically is your marginal product. If we want to calculate the slope of the total product at point C, we have to draw a tangent line, and that basically the slope of that tangent line is the marginal product at that point. So, at point A, the slope of that line is the marginal product, which is 20. At point B, slope of a line which is starting from origin 0 up to B. So, any point on the total product curve, if we draw a line from that point and connect it to the origin, the slope of that line is the average product. So, at point B, the average product is 20. Then, if we want to calculate the slope at point C, we draw a tangent line, that will be the marginal product, and we take that line to the origin, that remains the same line. So, the slope of the line at point C represents both marginal product as well as the average product. So, this is the point where your marginal and the average product, they are equal to each other. अब इस अगली स्लाइड पे देखें जिसमें हमने सेपरेटली एवरेज प्रोडक्ट एंड मार्जिनल प्रोडक्ट के कर्व को ड्रा किया है, एंड वी आर ट्राइंग टू फोकस ऑन द रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन द एवरेज प्रोडक्ट एंड द मार्जिनल प्रोडक्ट. इस स्लाइड में we have taken labor per month on the x-axis and we have taken output per month on the y-axis. Now, as we increase more and more labor, what happens? Our marginal product increases at an increasing rate, reaches to the maximum when the number of workers are 3, and then it starts declining. Okay. If you look at the average product curve, it increases, reaches the maximum, and then it starts declining. So, point E is the point where your average product and the marginal product of labor, they are equal to each other. Left of the point E, we have marginal product is greater than the average product and our average product is increasing. So, what we have here is that whenever the first relationship is whenever marginal product is greater than the average product, our average product will be increasing. Right of the point E, our marginal product is less than average product and our average product is decreasing. So, generalization is whenever our marginal product is less than the average product, our average product is decreasing. Then the last relationship is at point E itself, where your marginal product is equal to average product. So, whenever our marginal product is equal to average product, they are equal to each other. At that point, our average product is at its maximum. Now, we can summarize the same relationship and they are written on this slide here. These are the observations here. When our marginal product is 0, our total product is at its maximum. When marginal product is greater than average product, as we have seen in the previous graph, that in the area which is towards the left of point E, our marginal product is greater than average product, our average product is increasing. When our marginal product is less than average product, as per our previous graph, is towards the right of point E, our average product is decreasing. And finally, at point E itself, when our marginal product is equal to average product, our average product was at its maximum. Now, to further explain and emphasize the same relationship, why we are focusing so much on this is because the same relationships, whether they are for the output, whether they are for the cost or any other concept, the relationship of the average and the marginal is always the same. Therefore, to reiterate and focus more on this relationship, let us go to this particular slide here. We have one variable input labor. Average product is the slope of the line from origin to a point on total product lines B and C, as I have already explained with the help of a graph, that if we talk about the average product, so we take any point on the total product and then draw a line from that point which connects it to the origin, and the slope of that point will be the average product. Whereas, the marginal product is the slope of a tangent to any point on the total product line, lines A and C. To sum up here, what we have is we have shown both the total product curve and the marginal and the average product. Okay. The first graph here is that of the total product. Total product is increasing, reaches at its maximum at point D and start declining. Point C is the point where if we draw a tangent line, the same tangent line also connects to the origin. Therefore, at point C, our average product and the marginal product, they are equal to each other. If we look at the next graph here, next graph at point E, our marginal product and average product is equal to each other, that is at the number of workers 4, the same at the total product point C we have 4 workers. Towards the left of point E, our marginal product is increasing at an increasing rate and our average product is less than marginal. Towards the right of E, our marginal product is declining and our average product is more than the marginal product. At point E itself, they are both equal to each other, and that is the point where our average product is at its maximum. So, related to this concept where we are using the one variable input, and in our example we have taken labor as that particular variable factor of production, we also explain and we come across an important law in the production, short run production, and that is law of diminishing returns. try to recall when we were discussing the consumer behavior, there we discussed the law of diminishing marginal utility. And that law basically was reflecting as an individual is consuming more and more units of one particular good, the utility derived from that good start declining. It increases initially, reaches to the maximum, and then it starts declining. So that was the theory which was explaining the behavior of consumption behavior. Now here we are explaining the producer or the production behavior, and we are of course coming across the same law, and that is law of diminishing returns. And what does that law state? It states the same thing, that for a given level of technology, if we add more and more units of one variable inputs, initially your total output will increase, reaches to the maximum, and a point will be reached when it will start declining. But here we are assuming that the quality of that particular input, and in our example that input is the labor, कि लेबर की क्वालिटी जो है वो सेम है, देयर इज नो डिफरेंस बिटवीन लेबर नंबर 1 एंड लेबर नंबर 4 फॉर एग्जांपल, और लेबर नंबर 9. They are equally qualified for that particular job. So when the labor input is small, why that is happening basically? That initially when we add more workers, what happens? Our output increases, reaches to the maximum, and then it starts declining. Now why that trend is observed? What is behind the scene? Behind the scene is that when we increase the labor input, when we have fewer number of laborers already working, our marginal product increases due to the specialization. Because if let's suppose there were 2 workers before, they were performing all steps of the production process. Now if we add more and more and reaches up to 4 or 5 maximum, so what happens? They divide work. They divide work, and every worker specializes in one particular step of the production. So when one worker is specialized and is doing repeatedly the same job, then what happens? The production process is speeding up and we are able to produce more, and that's why our marginal product is increasing. Now on the other hand, we said initially we added more worker and the marginal product increases, reaches to the maximum, start declining. Now the question is why our marginal product start declining. The reason is when we add more and more workers into the production process, then each additional worker is not contributing to that production anymore, because it brings inefficiencies. Probably there is too much rush in the production. Therefore, instead of contributing, rather they are hindering the production process. So that law here, the law of diminishing marginal return, is giving certain important hint to the producer. And what is that important hint? That now the producer can decide about the size of the plant. That on this size of the plant, the maximum output by changing the number of workers is this much. And then after that, when the producer is trying to get more and more output by adding only the workers, he or she will be unable to get the additional output. Therefore, the producer now has to think about the configuration of the plant itself. On the other hand, when we are doing all of this analysis, we need to keep in mind that variable input, the quality of the variable input was constant, that each and every additional worker had the same qualification as of the previous and the one before him or her. Now this law of diminishing marginal returns explains the declining marginal product only, and it does not necessarily cover the negative part of it. What does it mean? इसका मतलब ये है कि the importance of the law of diminishing marginal return to the producer is that the producer जो है वो अपने plant size या उसकी configuration को जो है वो decide करे for future कि इतने workers जो हैं वो maximum इस plant पे काम करके आपको optimum output देते हैं, उसके बाद जब additional worker आप add on करते हैं तो उसकी contribution decline कर रही है. तो focus जो है diminishing marginal return का is on the declining marginal product rather than the negative. And the second thing is that throughout this discussion of the diminishing marginal returns, we assume that the technology is held constant, that there is no change in technology. अब इसी technology aspect को हम further देखेंगे कि अगर why are we assuming कि technology constant है, कि अगर technology improvement हो जाए तो क्या होगा कि आपके वर्कर्स पे तो डिमिनिशिंग रिटर्न्स आता रहेगा, लेकिन आपका आउटपुट लेवल जो है वो बढ़ जाएगा बिकॉज ऑफ द इम्प्रूव्ड टेक्नोलॉजी. इसको हम एक्सप्लेन करते हैं विद द हेल्प ऑफ दिस ग्राफ. इस स्लाइड पे ग्राफ को देखते हैं. एक्स एक्सिस पे लेबर पर टाइम पीरियड लिया है हमने और वाई एक्सिस पे आउटपुट पर टाइम पीरियड. द लोएस्ट curve here O1 is with the old technology. What are we having here? As we add more and more workers, we have the same thing, increase in the output maximum and then starts declining. This is one technology level. Then we have an improvement in technology, which is the next technology is an improved version of the previous technology. So we get O2. O2 with the improved technology is giving us the higher levels, but still we are experiencing the diminishing marginal returns to labor. Then another improved technology here, Q3, is giving us the higher level of output, but diminishing returns are still there. At point A, on the lowest indifference curve, what do we have? 6 workers giving us 50 units of output. But if we go for the third improved technology, the 6 number of workers are giving us a lot more than 50. But that is not due to the efficiencies of the worker, rather that is due to the improved technology. Now the maximum output point definitely is different for each and every technological stream. But the point to note here is, what we are trying to focus here is that when we are analyzing the law of diminishing marginal returns, we are assuming that we are talking about the same technological factor. There is no improvement in the technology. We are working on the same plant and we don't have any improvement in the production process itself. All we are changing is the labor. तो अभी तक जो हमने कवर किया आज के इस लेक्चर में, we started on the supply side and then we said okay, when we are talking about the supply side, we are analyzing the behavior of the firm, and then we talked about the production function, production process, marginal and the average product, law of diminishing marginal returns, and the last topic we need to cover today is that of the productivity, and that is the labor productivity. Now how do we define labor productivity? The formula is given on this slide here. The average productivity is equal to total output divided by total labor input. The labor productivity here is important not only in the production process, rather for the well-being of the consumers as well. And how is that possible? That is possible because when we measure the GDP of a particular economy, one way to measure is add up all the production in that particular economy, but the alternative way is that we look at all the payments which are made to the factors of production. एंड इवन टुडे वी डिफाइन के फैक्टर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन जो है उनकी कैटेगरीज हैं और उनमें लेबर जो है एक इम्पॉर्टेंट कैटेगरी है। तो जब लेबर की प्रोडक्टिविटी बढ़ती है, आउटपुट भी बढ़ती है, तो पेमेंट टू द लेबर आल्सो इंक्रीजेस। Therefore, when there is increase in the payments to the labor, the consumptions of the labor they also increase, and therefore the standard of living also increases. There are certain determinants of the labor productivity. Two important ones are the stock of capital and technological change. अगर हमारे पास stock of capital बढ़ जाए तो definitely labor productivity can be enhanced, और अगर हमारे यहाँ टेक्नोलॉजिकल चेंज आ जाए जैसे कि हमने प्रीवियस ग्राफ में देखा था, तो तब भी जो है लेबर की प्रोडक्टिविटी बढ़ जाती है एज मेजर्ड बाय एवरेज प्रोडक्ट ऑफ लेबर। अब हम हिस्टोरिकली देखते हैं, एम्पिरिकल जो हमने डेटा इकट्ठा किया हुआ है अबाउट द लेबर प्रोडक्टिविटी ऑफ द डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज। तो इस स्लाइड में हम देखते हैं लेबर प्रोडक्टिविटी इन डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज। We have taken France, Germany, Japan, UK and USA, and we are calculating output per employed person 1997, and that output was 54,407 for France, and the highest was for United States, and that was 60,915. If we are looking at the annual rate of growth of labor productivity measured in percentages here, we have taken 3 time periods, 1960 to 73, 74 to 86 and then 87 to 1997. What do we observe here is that the percentage growth in the productivity for US is very slow as compared to the other nations, and the best performer here is I believe on average is Japan, 8.3 to 2.5 and then 1.9, and then if we compare it with the others, so overall what this slide reflects is that the average productivity in the developed countries are slow. So what is the reason behind that? Why these productivity levels are slow? And that slow growth rate is due to the stock of capital. As we have seen, the productivity growth rate in US is slow. On average, the productivity growth rate in the developed countries is also decreasing. And why is that so? That one possible explanation is that one important determinant for the productivity is the stock of capital, and probably due to the decreasing capital for the US, we have slowed down in the productivity growth rate in United States as compared to the other countries after the World War II. And another explanation can be the depletion of the natural resources, and lastly of course the environmental regulations, they are also contributing to the slow growth rate of the labor productivity. इसके साथ ही हम आज का लेक्चर जो है कंक्लूड करना चाहेंगे, लेकिन कंक्लूजन से पहले एक वाइंड अप रिव्यू जो है वो हम करते हैं। आज के लेक्चर में हमने सप्लाई साइड और द फर्म बिहेवियर को स्टार्ट किया। उसमें हमने प्रोडक्शन फंक्शन isoquants are parallel to what we had for the consumer behavior as indifference curve, and then we talked about the law of diminishing marginal return which is parallel to the diminishing marginal utility for the consumer behavior, and then finally we compared the average product, marginal product, and we also discussed the relationship of average and the marginal product. Labor productivity was our last topic. How do we calculate the average productivity of the labor? अब अगले लेक्चर में इंशाल्लाह हम इसी सप्लाई साइड इकोनॉमिक्स को कंटिन्यू करते हुए हम प्रोडक्शन प्रोसेस देखेंगे विद टू वेरिएबल इनपुट्स, और उसके साथ साथ हम रिटर्न्स टू स्केल को डिस्कस करेंगे। रिटर्न्स टू स्केल में हम इंक्रीजिंग रिटर्न टू स्केल, कांस्टेंट रिटर्न टू स्केल एंड डिक्लाइनिंग रिटर्न टू स्केल को डिस्कस करेंगे, और फिर फर्दर हम कॉस्ट के एस्पेक्ट को भी डिस्कस करेंगे अगले आने वाले लेक्चर के साथ। आज के लेक्चर के साथ इजाज़त दीजिए, इंशाल्लाह फिर मुलाकात होगी एंड विल कंटिन्यू आवर दिस लेक्चर ऑफ द प्रोडक्शन। अल्लाह हाफिज़।